Hi, my name is Charlotte Laws, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the changes that are happening with respect to the real estate industry. I've been an agent for 35 years, and I think these changes are quite destructive. They're going to very much hurt buyers, they will hurt sellers, and they will hurt buyer agents in particular, those three groups. And also, I want to mention that the headlines in mainstream media have been extremely full of misinformation, unfortunately. So, for example, I just pulled a couple of headlines off the internet. What the end of 6% commission means for home buyers in the Washington Post. But there is no end to 6% commissions. Commission was never fixed at 6%. It's always been negotiable. And where I live, in Los Angeles, I hardly ever see a 6%. I haven't seen very many 6% in at least a decade. So when I go through the MLS, I actually did a study the other day, and I ran two neighborhoods, my own neighborhood, and then I chose another neighborhood. And I wanted to see over the past 2 years what commissions were like. And the lowest commission offered in the MLS was $1. There was a 1%, 1.5%, 1.75%. There were lots in there. There were mostly 2% and mostly 2.5%. There were very few 3%. And it went all the way up to the highest, which was a 10% offer to the buyer agent. So it was really all over the place. And so these headlines that you see that say agents charge 6%, or that's the standard, or that's the norm, that's incorrect. It has been negotiable for a very, very long time. In fact, 30 years ago, you might have seen a fair number of 6%, but you just don't see that, at least in Los Angeles. And that is where I work. So when I speak to these various issues, understand that I'm really talking about my own area, and I don't really have a lot of knowledge about real estate in Kansas City or Atlanta or New York or any other city. So there are quite a few headlines similar to that. There are also various publications that say that real estate commissions are going down. Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you go on the Realtor websites, the forums where real estate agents talk, there are quite a few of them saying that these changes are going to require quite a bit more work, and therefore they're going to need to raise their commissions. So it's not necessarily true that commissions are going down. Another thing that you will see a lot in headlines is that these changes are going to bring prices down. Well, that's not true either, and I can explain why. Because when someone purchases a house, one thing that's not built into the value is commissions. So an appraiser will look to put a value, for example, on a property. And so they look at the comps, the comparables in the neighborhood. They look at the other sales. They do not consider what commission is being paid. They don't consider escrow fees. They don't consider title fees. They don't consider lender fees or transfer taxes or HOA transfer fees. They don't consider any of these things. These have nothing to do with the value of the property. And so if you have a really strong seller's market, then the seller is not offering any enough commission to cover a buyer agent commission. So the seller offers a certain amount of money to his or her agent, the listing agent, who then would potentially offer commission to the buyer agent. But if they're not offering commission, that listing agent's not offering commission, then what happens when they get an offer, they have a certain price that they've already put the property at based on the comparables, and then that commission has to be tacked on top during the negotiation. So what that essentially means is if you have a property that's $1 million and now you've got a tack commission on, and say it's a $10,000 commission, then all of a sudden you have to add $10,000 to $1 million. So it does bring it up above comps, which means that you're raising values, you're raising prices in the neighborhood every time that happens. And so the next seller says, "Oh, I see my neighbor's house sold for $1.1 million. It didn't sell for $1 million; it sold for $1.1 million because they tacked that extra money on." Whereas if the seller were just offering commission like we've always been doing, then it would be selling for $1 million. So that's the reason why it's not bringing prices down. It's actually most likely going to bring them up, at least in a seller's market. In a buyer's market, it can be bad for the seller because if they're not offering commission to enough commission through the listing agent to the buyer agent, then they're probably going to get fewer people through the door. It just makes it much more complicated for the seller to get their property sold, to get people to see it, because, the whole goal for a listing agent is to try to get as many agents and their buyers through that door. And you're not going to have the ease of that. You're not going to be able to use that as a marketing tool. I think this whole settlement is kind of the goal, unfortunately, by the Department of Justice and perhaps the attorneys who are bringing these lawsuits, is to just get rid of a buyer agent. And I've actually heard the lead attorney on the Missouri case, which is Sitzer Burnett is the name of the case. I've heard him talking about how buyer agents don't really do anything. And I've seen the press, all these various articles, putting in information about buyer's agents, but they just unlock the door. Boy, is that incorrect. A buyer agent does more work than a listing agent. And if you don't believe me, you go up to 100 real estate agents and you say to them, I'm going to assure you a sale, but I'm going to give you a choice. You can either be the listing agent or you can represent the buyer. And I can tell you right now, 100% of those agents, every one of them is going to say, I want to be the listing agent. Why? Because it's less work. That's why. Because, I've worked with I've done listings and I've worked with lots of buyers. I'd say my business has always been 50-50, but a buyer, you work with them sometimes for a year and a half. My daughter is an agent. She's a real estate agent with a different firm from me. She's been working with one buyer for 4 years. So you're going out, you're seeing property, you're seeing hundreds of properties sometimes. You're writing offers on lots of properties, maybe 6 properties before a client actually gets into escrow, because you have multiple offers, because you have all cash buyers, investors coming in and competing with you, because you have buyers who are willing to remove all their contingencies because they so desperately want to win the property. So your client may have trouble, getting the first property, the second property, the third property. So you're writing all these offers, you're doing all this extra work, you're getting their lending in order, talking to their loan officer and making sure they have all their money, etc. And then finally you get into escrow. But even when you're in escrow, you have your inspections and it could fall out. So I just had a client that had that happen. We'd been looking for a year. It fell out of escrow. And because of mold and water under the house and things that we didn't know about until the inspection. So we canceled the escrow. So guess what? We're starting over again. That's what we had to do. And so then we're out there looking again at, dozens and dozens of properties running all over town, trying to get the properties because everything is multiple offers here in Los Angeles. And finally we got a property, but it has been a little bit over a year it took for this buyer to finally get into escrow. And we are thankfully closing in about a week. And my buyer is super happy about that. But that is hard. That is a lot of work. That is not unlocking a door and saying, here you go. That's it. Give me my check. That is not what it is. And by the way, agents care about their clients. Most agents care a lot about their clients. It's not about the money. When I look in the MLS at a commission rate, I just glance at it. I don't focus on it. I don't even calculate it until the close of escrow because I think it's bad luck to do that. So, that's how most the agents I know are like that. It's about the customer. It's about the buyer. And it's actually very exciting to go through the process with that buyer. And you're kind of like living vicariously through their experience, because you get to help them and advise them. And it's actually really kind of fun and exciting. But the changes are actually really bad because they change the focus to being all about the commission. In my entire career of 35 years, through all the ethics classes, and we take lots of classes in continuing education, and we have to take ethics training and, go through all of these things, not only the initial license, but you're still renewing it and you're doing other classes on top of that. Plus you have training through your own company. But we were always told that you cannot let the commission mess up your deal. You don't put it in the mix. You don't put it in a contract. That is unethical. You do not do that. So I've never done that. because that's unethical and I want to be an ethical agent. But now the way the Department of Justice is putting it, we have to make it front and center. We have to talk about it all the time with our buyer. Oh, our commission, our commission. It has to be written on the buyer agreement. Not only the first time, but every time you go into a property, they have to sign off on the commission for that property. And so there's like a line, they're like line items. And so there's a list and you have to put down 123 Main Street, 2.5% commission. And then when you go in Main Street, you have to say, Mr. Buyer, you have to sign off on this commission. So the buyer has to go sign off. And then you go to the next house, 245 Maple Street. Oh, this one is a 2%. You have to sign off on 2%. You know, I mean, my God, the buyer's going to think all you care about is your commission. But that's what they're asking us to do now. It's insane. It completely shifts the focus away from the client, away from probably the biggest purchase of their life or one of their biggest purchases, because a home usually is. And all of a sudden, the focus is on the real estate agent and their money. And I just think that's terrible. I mean, it's just like, it's really bad. The other thing is that I don't think that, you know, because of the way this is structured, it's a lot more work for the buyer agent, because it's not just the commission is not just listed in the MLS. Now they have to call the other agent. They have to jump through hoops. They have to get a piece of paper sent confirming that commission. They have to go through all this trouble to, you know, get this all set up. And then of course the buyer is going to have to sign off on it. And, you know, so you have to go through all these extra steps that you used to not have to go through. And so it actually makes it quite a bit more work, which is why a lot of agents are saying, well, I'd have to raise my commission. But I think there are a lot of buyers out there. I mean, I know that a lot of buyers cannot afford to pay their agents. And I mean, honestly, I don't think I've even had a client who's buying something for $2 million who has the extra money to feel comfortable paying the real estate commission, because most buyers are just like barely making it. They have everything figured out, like down to the last penny, and I need this much for the loan, and I have to have this much left in my account. And so it's really difficult for people to be able to afford. But, you know, VA buyers, I mean, veterans are completely screwed with this, because VA loans don't allow the veteran to pay the commission. FHA buyers are 3% down. They don't have the money to pay a real estate agent. So what's going to happen is that a lot of buyers are going to either try to do it themselves, which means they're probably going to seriously screw up. They're going to maybe get a bad property or, you know, make some bad decisions, and it could be a disaster for them. Or they're going to go to the listing agent. And by going to the listing agent, then you have something called dual agency. And so what that essentially means is the listing agent will be getting commission from the buyer of some sort, tacking it onto the purchase price, and he or she will be getting money from both the seller and basically for representing the buyer. But then you have a situation, and dual agency is not even legal in every state. There are 8 states that don't allow it, such as Florida and Texas do not allow it. My state does allow it. And the problem with dual agency is that a lot of times one party is disgruntled. They think that the agent is favoring the other side. Oh, well, you're just telling the seller everything I say, and you're favoring them. I know you are. And so you end up with problems, and you end up with a lot more lawsuits. And when I first started the industry, we didn't have representation for buyers back in the 80s when I first started. If you were, helping bring the buyer in, you were still an agent working for the seller. And the reason they changed that is because there were so many lawsuits. It was such a nightmare, with buyers feeling they didn't get represented and feeling really angry and upset about it. So now we are going back to this buyer beware, like, well, Mr. Buyer, we don't care about you. It's all about the seller, and too bad for you. And that's the atmosphere that the Department of Justice is pushing us towards. And so, it's regressing. I mean, I have been around, as I said, for 35 years, and I've seen all the tweaks and changes in this finely tuned machine I call the real estate industry. And they're always changing the forms, or no, we have to add this to help buyers, or this to help sellers, or these courses because you have to do your ethics properly, and you don't want to ever be unethical. And so we're going through all of these changes and perfecting it. And now the Department of Justice is just basically taking, and these class action attorneys are just bringing a wrecking ball in and going, just knock the whole thing down. I don't care. We're just going to start over. And it's just kind of amazing to me because we put so much care and attention into making this a really good industry for everybody, for buyers, sellers, and buyer agents. And another thing you should know is that for some reason there's this false perception in the public that agents make a lot of money. And I think this comes from perhaps those reality shows where you have the Beverly Hills agent driving around in the Rolls Royce and selling $10 million deals, $10 million deals every day. I don't know, but that doesn't happen in real life. Reality shows are exactly that. They're fake for the most part. And so if you do have some agents who are making a lot of money, and there are some, those are the 1%ers. And they're mostly doing listings. And so they're not really going to be affected by this as much because the listing agents are probably going to make more money because they're going to be picking up the buyers in addition to all the listings that they already currently make. So what you're going to have is these agents, the average agent makes $52,000 a year. They don't make a lot of money. It's a middle income profession. And so a lot of these agents who represent a lot of buyers are just going to be leaving the industry. Maybe they're going on welfare now and let the taxpayer support them. I don't know what they're going to do, but they probably will not be able to earn a living if their $52,000 is all of a sudden cut, as President Biden suggests. He thinks the commission should be cut. And some of the articles say it should be cut 50%. But $26,000 a year is actually under the poverty level, which is $29,000 for a family of four. So there's this perception that agents are so wealthy and they make too much money, but that just isn't true. And part of the reason why the average is $52,000 is because you got to remember, when you're working with a buyer, you may work with 5, 6 different buyers, and maybe only one buyer will close escrow. So you're going out showing properties, you're spending hours and hours, maybe writing out, offers, and, you can maybe spend years, a year with each of the buyers and only one closes escrow. So you're spending a lot of time that you're not getting paid for. And so, so that's another reason why this is all a very bad idea, because it's really an attack on the middle class agents, middle class buyers. It's attack on veterans who are really not going to be able to purchase in most cases unless there is going to be commission offered from the seller side. And also I want to clarify that the seller is not paying the buyer's commission. That's not how it's ever been. The seller makes a contract with the listing agent for something, whatever it is, 4%, 5%, 6%, 8%, whatever it is. And then the listing agent offers commission to the buyer agent. It's almost like a referral fee, because we do referral fees sometimes. So it's that kind of a thing. It's not that the seller is paying the buyer agent like so many newspapers will tell you, or the Department of Justice might tell you that, but that actually isn't really true. So, and when I do a contract on a listing, I don't even fill in the amount of money going to the buyer agent initially. So the seller is basically saying to me as their representative, you can offer the buyer agent whatever you want. And so it's always been 50-50. I've always personally always split it. But the reason I don't fill it in is I like to leave flexibility. Because, for example, if I have a house that's a hard to sell house, I might want to increase that compensation to the buyer agent and pay them more than I'm getting myself. Or if I have a seller who all of a sudden says, I want you to put fancy, expensive ads in lots of these magazines, which would up my marketing cost for that property, then I might want to offer the buyer agent a little bit less than I'm getting, because all of a sudden my out-of-pocket is really high. Because the one thing about listing agent, even though it's not as much work, you do have to expend money up front, more than the buyer agent. The buyer agent is spending money on gas or maybe buying some lunches or this and that for their clients. But the listing agent has, photographs, professional photographs, drone photographs, advertising, signs, doing a lot of very expensive things. It can cost thousands of dollars. And also people should know that when we get a commission, we have to split it with our brokerage. And some agents have to split it 50-50 with their brokerage. In addition, there are many brokerages have additional fees. So they have like a desk fee, or they have, like my company has about a $700 fee, kind of like an extra commission fee that we as an agent, have to pay the company. So, we're not getting as much money as you think we are. We also have to pay error and omissions insurance. We have to pay our own health care. We don't have any coverage from anybody. We're independent contractors. So, there's just tons and tons of expenses. And with the IRS, our taxes are higher as independent contractors than somebody who's an employee. So those are some of the issues. Another thing that because of this new proposal, if this ends up happening the way it's been proposed, is that it's going to advantage the big real estate firms over the small real estate firms. Why, you ask? Because the big firms and have minimums usually. So my firm, for example, you're not allowed to offer less than 2.5% commission to the buyer agent. And I know another firm that's the same way, and some of them have a minimum of 2%. I mean, every firm is different as far as what they do, because commissions are negotiable and every firm can do what they want. But the big firms, people are going to know, the buyer agents, because these are big companies with lots of listings. The buyer agents are going to be able to say, oh, I can show that listing because I already know what that commission is. I know it's not a 0%. I don't have to stress over this and think, oh, great, I just spent 1.5 years with this buyer and now I'm going to be working for free because they're offering 0% and they're refusing to add my commission in, and my buyer's not going to pay. And guess what? The buyer-broker agreement will not be enforced. It's not going to happen. Those real estate companies are not going to be suing buyers and saying, you didn't pay our agent. They're not going to do that. So they're kind of almost meaningless, to be honest. They really are. And I mean, if you can get it, as part of the deal, then you get it as part of the deal and you get paid your commission. But if the buyer just doesn't want to pay you, there's not much you can do. Even if you've spent 500 hours showing properties, writing offers, and doing all sorts of things for that buyer, you're probably just going to be out of luck. You've just wasted time and you didn't even make minimum wage. You made 0. So it's a really, really tough profession for somebody who makes $52,000 a year on average. And I'm just amazed at all the attacking by the public, by mainstream media, by the president, by his press secretary, who actually said the other day that called real estate commissions junk fees. I think she didn't know what she was talking about. I think it was a mistake. But she should apologize, because she basically said that in a press conference when asked about this issue. And the president has said they should come down, that people should reduce their commissions, because $52,000 is apparently too much money for any one family to make. The president, on the other hand, his last tax return, I believe he received $480,000 last year was his income. And the press secretary, her salary is $180,000 a year. So I don't see them reducing their money to help the little guy. I see him asking somebody who makes $52,000 a year to reduce their salary. Let's see if there are any other issues. There could be more discrimination because of these changes. I know that, obviously you're going to be potentially discriminating against the buyers who can't afford to pay. There are going to be agents who say, I'm not going to represent you. Sorry, you'll just have to do it on your own or go find somebody else. And so there's going to be potentially discrimination against the lower income buyers for that reason. But there could be other discrimination charges as well, because of all this, the fact that you're not offering a set commission, say a seller says, I don't want to offer any extra commission to the buyer agent through the listing agent. Then what happens is that you get an offer, and you could have, say you have 3 offers, and the seller says, well, I like this person, I like this agent, so we'll offer them 3% commission, and this one over here, we'll offer them 0.5% because I don't really like them. So you could get charges of discrimination, because all of a sudden it's not this fair, equal system where everybody can see it's a 2% commission to the buyer agent, everybody knows it, or it's 4%, everybody knows it, or it's 2.25%, everybody knows it. It's not that. It could just be willy-nilly. The seller can say, no, I like that person. That agent over there, no, 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 she's got kind of weird eyes. I don't know. I don't want to offer her very much. And so some of these people could feel they were discriminated against. And so you could end up with lawsuits over that as well. Just more and more problems in an industry that's actually been very smooth, and it's been, it's been good for everybody. And as I said, tweaked over the years to perfect it. Let's see if there's anything else. I mean, this does increase the gap between the rich and the poor, because you got the 1%er agents who are the ones who do lots and lots of listings, and they're going to make more money. And then you're going to be knocking out all the lower income agents, or the middle income agents. And so they're going to be probably not making any money at all. And, the rich people, the investors who don't mind paying commission to a buyer agent, they'll be doing fine. They'll be getting properties right and left because they don't care, because they have all cash usually. And my investors don't mind paying whatever commission. They don't care. They just figure it into the price of the property and their repairs and what they have to do in order to make a profit. So you're basically going to have different groups of people. You're going to have the poorer people who are too bad for you, buyer beware. The poorer agents, buyer beware, too bad for you. And then you're going to have the 1%ers, the buyers who are 1%ers and the agents who are 1%ers. And that's what you're doing. You're widening the gap between the rich and the poor. It's more of an attack on the middle class and the lower class in this case. And you just have a much more negative system. And let's see, is there anything else that I wanted to say? Another thing I just want to mention about the way I've always worked, and one reason why it starts out, I do a lot of work for buyers. And I just want to mention that normally when I show properties to buyers, I don't even show the first property until I've previewed 70 houses for them. That's kind of my standard. It's like I always try to see 70. It's harder in a market like we currently have because there are just not as many listings. And so I may preview 25 or 30. But before I even put that buyer through the door, I want to spend that time running around and looking at everything so that I know every nook and cranny. I know what's a good deal, because my thing as an agent has always been making people money. And my specialty has always been working with investors, but working with regular people and turning them into investors, turning them into multimillionaires. So I take my clients who are teachers or nurses or sales clerks or whatever they are, just ordinary people with an ordinary income, and we get them a place to live. But after that, it's about getting them rental properties and properties that they can flip, maybe rent it for a couple of years and then sell it and make money. And so I've turned a lot of ordinary people into multimillionaires and into rich people, essentially, who didn't start out that way, because real estate is the best investment, in my opinion. And so so that's one reason why it takes, a lot for me, because a lot of times I'm also, as a buyer agent, I'm knocking on doors at houses that are not listed and saying, I have a client for this neighborhood. Would you be interested in selling to my client? Or a condo complex where my client wants to live. Or I'm looking at angles as to how to make a particular property worth more money, an easy, inexpensive way that all of a sudden it can raise its value very quickly. For example, if someone has a house that you're looking at buying has an unpermitted room, but it's to code. So then what you do is during the inspection, you get a contractor to come in and tell you what the cost is to get that permitted. And then at the close of escrow, assume it's not much money, at the close of escrow, you get it permitted. And all of a sudden you go from maybe 1,800 square feet house is what you bought. And all of a sudden now you have a permitted 2,200 square foot house, for example. So you've already made money off your house and you didn't do anything. You just spent a couple $1,000s pulling permits and getting the city to approve it. So that's the kind of thing I look for. I also am very good at rental, looking for ways to make an Airbnb out of a section, or having a rental unit to bring in extra income. And so that kind of thing. And I have clients who need that extra income. And so we look for those kinds of properties. And so that's the kind of thing I have an eye for. So anyway, that just goes to, again, what we do as buyer agents. It's a lot of work. And so don't let anybody tell you that we don't do anything. Don't let anybody tell you that we are just all wealthy people driving around in Rolls Royces and rolling in dough. And we're hard workers who care about our clients. That's what it is. And I do believe this agreement, if this happens between the Department of Justice and the National Association of Realtors, is a complete disaster. I think it's horrible for everybody, and it's just, taking everybody back to the bad days, the buyer beware days, the days where, things were just not, it wasn't a good system. Anyway, that's about it, I guess. I mean, I've talked a lot, and there may be more, but I think I've talked too long. Anyway, all right. Take care. Bye-bye.